Welcome to Emerging Franchise Brands, the podcast that introduces you to the visionary founders of America's fastest growing franchise opportunities. We'll also hear from industry pros as they share insights on what it really takes to achieve the elusive milestone of 100 plus locations. I am your host, Frank Fumey, founder of I9 Sports, and my 20-year journey from inception to acquisition has given me a unique perspective on how to succeed in franchising. Join me as we welcome today's guest. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. On today's show, I have the founder of Hoppin, Rich Moyer. Rich, how are you today?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
It is my pleasure. All right, Rich, what is Hoppin?
Hoppin is a high-tech self-serve bar. We like to call ourselves a tap room because we have 60 self-serve taps. And then we have full cocktail bars. Very energetic, good vibes. The interior space is completely different than any of your typical traditional bars. And at the end of the day, we're an experience company to our consumers. And you can go get a drink at any bar in the country. What makes you want to walk into Hoppin is going to be the experience.
Nice. All right, so let's get the obvious out of the way, because as soon as somebody hears it's a self-service bar, all of the challenges come into play. So walk me through again, what happens when I walk into a Hoppin bar, and how does everything get policed?
Yep. So the challenges are actually, I've always said, the self-serve aspect actually eliminates 95% of a typical bar owner's headaches, and for many reasons that I'll explain throughout this podcast. But when you walk into a Hoppin, you're greeted by our staff. They provide a good experience. They have fun. They joke around. They'll ask you for your ID, make sure you're legal age, a credit card or a debit card to open up a tab, and they will hand you an RFID wristband with your credit and debit card back and your ID. Once you are checked in, they'll take you over to the glass shelves. You'll be able to pick any glassware that you want. They'll explain the entire space to you. You'll be able to scan your wristband and pour 1/10 of an ounce all the way to a full glass. And that's beer, wine, cider, seltzers. Some states that is legal, we can do full cocktails on tap.
Okay, wow. And so there is a limit, right? Just like you walk into a bar, there's a 2-drink maximum per time you go up, right?
Correct. So when you reach that limit, our screen on our technology will tell you, hey, you exceeded your limit. It'll have a little joke on there. Find one of our staff members. Our staff members will, one, check that you're able to drink more, that you're not intoxicated, and we have to tell you to go to the water tap. And then if you're able to drink more, they'll scan their card, you'll scan your wristband, and within 2 seconds, you have another 2 drinks. So the actual aspect of one-on-one and making sure individuals are not intoxicated or overly intoxicated is safer with our system than it is with a busy bartender that has 20 or 30 people deep and really isn't paying attention to see if people have drank too much. So it's a one-on-one experience compared to 20 people deep at a bar, and you're just kind of waving the bartender down to get a drink.
Sure. Now, I was on your website, and I understand this really is about the experience. This isn't like a self-service yogurt place where you're going to get your, in this case, your beer and leaving, or just drinking and heading out. You really try to create an atmosphere that is fun for people. You want them to hang around. You want them to play some games. So why don't you talk to me a little bit about what differentiates yourself and your brand? Because I think you've got something that's really different here.
Yeah. Overall, the experience from our staff, right? They're there to provide you an experience from the moment you walk in, when you're at the tap wall, when you're ordering cocktails, when they're coming around picking up drinks. They're always joking. They're always having fun. So the service aspect is completely different than your traditional bar, right? You just walk into a bar, you go to the bar and you order a drink. Hopefully you can get through the crowd to find a bartender to get a drink. So that aspect is different. And then on the flip side, we have, slower days, we have games. We'll do trivia on Tuesdays, music bingo on Wednesdays, and then we have board games, Uno. We have a huge Scrabble board on every one of our walls, so you can play Scrabble, which is always fun to see what people leave on our Scrabble board after a Saturday night. Upstairs or anywhere in the tap room, we have dart boards. Outside, we're usually going to have a putting green and cornhole boards. So overall, the environment is fun. It's interactive. The staff is always going to be in tune. Every time you come back, they're going to joke with you, whether you've come for one time or you brought a friend and they have fun with you that way. So the experience overall is great. The environment is completely different. It's not a dark bar or a dark brewery. When you walk in, it's very light, a lot of white walls, greens. And then on the weekends, we'll do live music or DJs. So some of the typical bar things. but the music that we choose and the things that we choose keep people there and make them want to come grab a drink with us.
Nice. Rich, what inspired you to create this? I wanted to kind of take me back to that day, that aha moment. You went, I've got it. This is what I'm going to do. Why did that happen? When did that happen?
Yeah, so it's funny. I've always told people I've never really had all the companies I've owned and have exited. I've never had the idea. The idea always came from somebody else. So one night, a friend of mine at the time said, "Hey, would you invest in a bar?" It was like 11 o'clock at night. And I hung up. I said, "There's no chance I'm investing in a bar. I don't go out. I really don't drink that much. It's just casual with my wife or friends every once in a while." The next day, he sent me a video of the technology, and I quickly changed my mind because I saw an opportunity to open up something that was completely different. I've always said from day one, we don't have to be different. We don't have to be better. We have to be different. And the technology was different in itself. Our environment is completely different. Our staff and our culture is completely different. So that was the aha moment when I saw the technology, and I knew that it would eliminate a lot of the headaches that I was worried about.
Wow. So going back though, this was not your first rodeo in business. And I think that's kind of key for the audience to hear. Before though, I understand you were a PGA professional at 22 years old.
Yeah. So I went to college for golf, got in the golf industry, became a Class A, basically a club professional and teaching professional. So I did that for 6.5 years before I realized that I was on the wrong side of the county.
And then, okay, so what was your first company that you started?
I got into sales after the golf industry, and sales gave me the ability and the know-how of if I can sell, I can do anything. If I can sell, I can find somebody smarter than me to do the things that I'm selling.
There you go.
And I found a niche in the construction world. In Charlotte, it was booming, and I started with just pressure washing. So I was selling other contractors work, and then I was subbing out. So I was just a broker of services. And I quickly ramped that up from $0 to 1.8 million the first year, 3.6 million the second year, and then 6.5 million the third year. And in that 2 months into my fourth year, I ended up selling it for multi-millions. And
Nice.
that company is still thriving today in multiple states. So it's good to see your baby passed on and still doing well.
Absolutely. And then, so you opened another company called Two Scoops Creamery, I understand?
Yep. The summer before I sold my first company, one of my best friends, again, the idea came from him. He's got a family recipe, homemade ice cream. His uncle's in Florida and St. Pete area. And he said, "Yo, would you be interested in investing in a homemade ice cream spot?" And the upfront capital wasn't that much. And the ability to do something a little bit more fun where the customers were happy instead of my customers yelling at me every morning at 5 a.m. in the construction world. I said, "Yeah, I'll invest the money. You guys run the day-to-day." So two of my best friends till this date and two of the best partners that I could ever ask for run that. We have 6 locations with another 3 opening this year.
Wow, that's great. All right, so that brings us all the way to Hoppin now, right? So you launch Hoppin, you have your company-owned location. What ultimately made you decide that franchising was the right way for you to go? Because you didn't have franchise experience in your prior life, right?
I did not have franchise experience, and I wish I did, because franchising is an animal, especially being on the franchisor side. But I'm fortunate in Charlotte to have a lot of great franchisors to be able to reach out to, and everybody in the industry is great. So franchising, the idea was never there from the beginning. Obviously, I didn't know anything about it. We opened up our first location, and that first year was just booming. We poured 3.5 million ounces that first year. And while people were coming in from other states, they said, "Man, this branding is awesome. You guys are awesome. The experience awesome. How do we open these? Can we open a Hoppin in Florida? Can we open a Hoppin in Tennessee or Nashville, wherever it may be?" And it started to get me think, like, how can we expand this without the upfront cost of trying to raise a ton of money and do it corporately? So I started to dive into the franchising in 2019, which was a couple of years after we opened. 2019 rolled around, started to work with my legal team for an FDD and get all that set up. 2020 came, quickly halted everything. It was just keep our head above water, make sure my staff was putting food on the table for the family. And at that point, I just put it on hold. And then 2022 came and I started that back up, and we got everything rolling August, September of 2022.
Yeah, it takes a little while. Of course, none of us have many memories of 2021. We all remember 2020, but like it went like 2020, and then all of a sudden we all woke up in 2022.
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
It was like 2 years later. So I'm not surprised. So when you started launching this franchise, I'm curious, did you bootstrap it? Did you seek outside investors? What were your thought process on getting this thing off the ground and really starting to expand this?
For the most part, it's been bootstrapped. I did bring in Martin Truex Jr., NASCAR driver, great friend of mine and silent investor. So he owns 25% of the brand. I own 75%. And most of his investment has gone to our other two locations corporately,
Mhm.
and the rest of the investment is definitely stayed in. But the locations that we have kind of funded the franchising side. And we're getting to a point now where we might have to bring in more capital, whether if it's from me or him, or we bring outside investors for equity portion. But yes, bootstrap for the most part. I try and keep it lean and mean, and I hire people that, rather hire one killer than three people that are doing half-ass work.
Absolutely. A players, right? All day long.
Yep.
Yep. So to bring everybody up to speed here, you've got two company-owned locations. You have one franchised location that's currently open in Rock Hill, North Carolina, but you've got five more that are going to be opening up this year. We're off to the races now, my friend.
Yeah. Well, I've always, like you were saying before we jumped on this, slow and steady wins the race. And especially in franchising, everybody I've spoke to is like, your first franchisees are the most important. Start slow, understand the whole entire process. And it's almost like you kind of crawl and then go straight into running. You kind of skip walking. So yeah, we're off to the races. We have two locations in Nashville, Tennessee that most likely will open up by the end of this year. One in Dallas, Texas, that'll open around June or July. One in Fort Worth, Texas, that's going to open around June or July, and then one in Matthews, North Carolina, that will open right around June or July. So they're all kind of falling around the same time frame.
That's awesome. It's kind of contradictory to us being entrepreneurs that we want to grow fast. We want to, blow this thing up, but we know that slow and steady ultimately win the race because we can't open more locations than we can support. And we always think we can support more. But the truth is, when we get into franchising, there are systems and processes, right, that we didn't even know we needed. You don't even know what you don't know, because I could at least speak from my experience. In some cases, I went, damn, I really didn't think a franchisee would do that or think of that, but okay, I guess we need to plan for that. And there was a lot of that. And my FDD is riddled with this or that because of what somebody wanted to do or didn't want to do or any of those things and anything in between. But the franchise journey is, I think it really has to be at the rate that you feel comfortable in, that you can adequately support. And we're seeing all these brands, though, Rich, that are, they're so excited about they're selling, 30, 40, 50 locations. And then you ask them how many open. They say they have 3 or 4 open. I'm thinking they have no idea what they're about to encounter. There's so much. So I'm proud of you. I'm happy for you that you have 5 that are opening this year. I think that's great.
It's definitely hard to do, as like you said, as a founder and a visionary. You want to move fast, but yes, to your point, I hired a fractional CMO a little over a year ago, and we're about 95% done with our marketing guide, and that marketing guide is about 80 pages long, right? So to take everything that we did naturally and put it into a book and a guide, so the franchisees understand what the value is and what why they signed up with us,
Right.
it's unreal, because we just do it naturally. We just rock and roll, and we go and move and we make things happen. But
Yeah.
it's crazy thing for franchising.
It is, you know what? When I thought that I've seen every franchise concept, and there's so many, there are a dime a dozen of concepts that keep, copycats. Yours is different.
Yeah. Again, from day one, I always said we don't have to be better. We just have to be different, right? People, especially our demographic, they want it different. They want something that's an experience, something that everybody else wants to go do, and their friends can hang out and be more Instagrammable or social media driven.
Right.
So we are probably the only one in our space that is doing in the bar restaurant space that's doing what we're doing.
Yeah. Okay. So one of the most common questions I get from founders that are starting out is, where do I find my first franchisees? So since you've got one that's open, but 5 more that are going to be open this year, where did you find your first 5 or 6?
Yeah, the first one locally, again, he's just 30 minutes away in Rock Hill, South Carolina. He was a customer. He saw our technology at one of our locations and reached out to our tech company and said, "Hey, I want to open one of these, but do you have any of your operators that I can speak with?" And usually any self-serve, they're usually referring me to talk to potential sales. I don't know how many sales I've made for those guys, but he reached out. I spoke to him. I said, "Hey, I'm actually in the process of finalizing my FDD here in a few months. If you want to franchise, we can support you in that." Because he was a retired school teacher, him and his wife, and some of his partners are school teachers as well. And he called me, I think, the next day, and he's like, "We're on board." So that one kind of came easier than I would say most franchisors' first one.
Sure.
The other locations, every one of them came from our organic advertising, whether it was on Facebook, social media, or they've seen it in one of our tap rooms.
So, I mean, that is sort of typical. The first one is generally a customer or referral, and it starts to grow from there.
Yeah, the snowball effect.
Yeah, sure is. Can you elaborate a little bit on the training and support for franchisees? And are they expected to be, you expect them to be owner operated or manager operated locations?
Yeah. I try and stay away from the semi-absentee just because it has a bad taste, I feel like, for some people. But yeah, we do investor manager is what we like to call it. You can own and operate if you wish, but I've structured this business to be very owner manager or investor manager structure. And the ability to do that and open up multiple locations and have the freedom is what the goal is.
Okay, so that brings me to the next thing then. Maybe not so obvious question though, your thoughts on selling multiple units to an investor early on. Do you have something set up in your FDD where they can buy a package of Hoppin?
Yeah, our franchisee in Nashville has 3 units. He's multi-unit. Our franchisee in Dallas, Texas has 3 units. And yeah, it's structured, both of them are structured basically exactly the same. They have to open up and sign leases at certain times. So that portion of it is great. The group in Dallas has an operating manager. So one of the partners is going to be managing, which is great because we got to vet him. Our group in Nashville will probably be very hand-holding in the process of who he's going to hire for his manager or regional manager, because there's a huge culture fit with our brand.
Okay. With that said, is the investor responsible also for coming to training, or can they just send their managers there?
Depends on the investor, right? I mean, I've spoke to a few investors who own 20, 30 McDonald's. More than likely, they're going to send their team that they already have, right? And we feel comfortable with that. Now,
Sure.
The current multi-unit franchisees we have in Dallas and Fort Worth, they don't have that portfolio or the team underneath them already. So we'll require the investors to all be here.
Good for you. Technology obviously plays a role in your company in a large part. So you're almost as much of a technology company as you are a bar, right?
Yeah.
So walk me through a little bit more about the technology, not just obviously we talked about the draft experience, but how technology plays a role in supporting the franchisees' efforts.
Yeah, just the ability to have the freedom of and the mindset going to bed and knowing exactly every 10th of an ounce that's poured and who poured it, right? So the traditional bar owner has to worry about people giving drinks away and stealing. It's easy for us to catch on our self-serve tap. And I have, 3 simple rules. Don't steal, don't give drinks away, don't drink on the job, and have a good attitude, right? Have fun. That's it. Those are the only 3 things you can get fired from in my rule book. So the technology piece allows our franchisees to be anywhere in the world and understand, what's going on in their tap room. And then it's also just very in depth. For our managers, they can see every 10th of an ounce that's poured, but they can also see, all right, when's this keg going to kick? In the back office or right on the screen, it shows them how many ounces or how much is left in that keg, so they can kind of prepare to change the next keg. The reporting on it is great. Our management team also, who our purchasing manager does a great job of providing, reports and saying, here's what's selling well in our market, here's what's selling well in other markets once we get those open, and providing those. And the franchisee has full rights to order what they want, put on their wall what they want. We will just provide them, what we think is selling best.
Okay. And what about staffing? If I was going to open a Hoppin, what does my staff look like? How many members do I need?
Yeah, this is a big one right now, especially in the world of having employees. We have a maximum of 12-ish employees, usually 8 to 12 employees total, depending on the market and how busy you are. So if you're just on the 12 employees, 3 of them are full-time, the rest are part-time at $3 an hour, depending on state laws. Some laws are a little bit different. So very minimal staff, very minimal full-time staff. And one of the ways we get around that is we don't have a full kitchen. We partner with local food operators, whether it's a food truck, a neighboring restaurant, or we build out a kitchen inside of our space and we sublease it to a food operator in the market.
Okay, so is there a revenue share plan for the franchisees with the food operators?
Yeah, we always try to negotiate 10%. Usually it falls around 5% of the gross revenue. Since anything that's going through our tap room is because we've created the tap room.
Right.
And then if it is more of a food stall inside the space, we'll charge them % of their revenue plus the rent.
And also, if I was a franchise owner, do you help me gain clients? Where are we marketing other than, obviously there's a storefront?
Yeah. So it's always a little bit different than your typical franchise, right? Startup. Everybody wants that new cool shiny bar to go to. All the influencers, all your local media, everybody jumps on it. So it's
Sure.
very easy for us to jump off in the beginning and be very successful. What we've learned over our last almost 7 years is how do we capture their contacts and their data and then be able to remarket them via text and email. So we start that process 90 days out. 90 days out, we start to run ads and we start to collect data, and that's phone numbers, emails, and sometimes the ability to direct message them on Facebook and Instagram.
You are a technology company hidden among beer.
Yeah, yeah. Beer is just the product, right? Beers and
That's it.
drink.
Absolutely. No, but you're very much in the technology business, of course. What's been your biggest surprise so far, Rich, since you started franchising?
I think for me, just the amount of things that go into taking everything off of your mind, everything off of your director of marketing, your director of operations, and putting them things into an actual guide or a book or a countdown sheet of these are all the things that have to happen before grand opening because we did it naturally. And then you start to write it down and you see, wow, that's 80 pages of things that we did in more detail. I think that's the biggest wow for me. And then I've just gotten the company to a point where I've taken it as far as I can as a founder. And as I mentioned before, looking on bringing on a president that can be more structured and start to implement things. And you've had a few interviews with individuals that are in the franchise world, whether they were director of ops or presidents of previous companies.
That's great. I remember the question I had when I was wondering if it was time for me to hire a president and COO. And I had a conversation with another franchisor, and I had known him for a little bit and had known that he had hired a COO and president. And I asked him, I said, when do you know that it's time to hire a president? And he goes, if you're thinking about it, that means it's time. You'll know when you know. And I was like, that's exactly where I am. So congrats. I'm glad you
exactly
realized
where I
that.
was.
Yeah. And this is where your company starts to explode, because any one founder, as great as they are, can only take it as far. But, hiring that president, and I've said this a million times on the show, hiring for your weakness. You have to hire somebody that's going to complement your skills. You don't need just a person who is exactly like you, but somebody that's going to bring something different to the table that's going to allow you guys to really just flourish.
100%. There's things that I know I can't do, which is I can rifle off visionary things and let's do this idea. But I need somebody to go implement those and hold people accountable and make sure. And as you're growing, right, it's easy with one location.
Right.
That's super easy. When
Of
you
course.
have multiple locations, plus you're trying to just develop everything you need to develop for a franchise, all those things start to fall through the cracks. So you need somebody that kind of complements you in that aspect. And he can't do what I do, and I can't do what he does.
This is the most common description of what we need as an entrepreneur, because most likely we as an entrepreneur are the visionary. We weren't the integrator, right? If you were just an integrator and you launched a franchise, you might not have the vision or the drive that you need, right? You'd be well into the weeds. And to get something off the ground like this, getting into the weeds early on is not how you're going to truly launch. But you need what most people need at this point.
Yeah, yeah. I actually had a conversation with my partner Truex and his team about a few weeks ago and said, look, if we want to take this to the next level, I'm at a point now where if I stay doing what I'm doing, we're actually going to move slower than if we bring in the right person.
I absolutely agree with that. Yeah. And it's better to do this now before you have too many franchise locations and you're just spinning too many plates at that point.
Yeah. 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 You get lost in the mix real fast.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're going to be pulled in a million different directions because your staff is going to grow too. I meant to ask you earlier, corporate staff, how many do you have right now?
Yeah, director of operations, director of marketing, and then he has an assistant director of events, since we are very heavy on corporate events, corporate parties, and private parties. Then she has her assistant, and then we have our controller, director of development, and then myself. So right now it's pretty lean, and we'll bring on the president as well. And as we grow, since we handle all the marketing in-house, we handle all digital marketing. They handle like on the boots on the ground marketing in their territories. We'll hire more marketing leads in the locations that have 3 or 4 units.
Okay. And going back to training, I'm kind of thinking about now about your corporate staff. Is that corporate training done just in the office, or is it done also in the corporately owned location, I would imagine?
Yeah, so we'll have about 10 days of training here in Charlotte at our HQ, and they'll go through pretty long days of office training per se, or going through things, and they'll go full days of opening the tap room and then closing the tap room. And they'll do that for about 8 days straight with 1 day off. And then we'll send one or two of our team, our training team out to their location grand opening week, Tuesday through Sunday, to be there to support their team. And we usually tell the ownership or the managers that they're going to do the training while we're out there, and we'll just be there for support before they open, and then we'll support throughout grand opening week.
Okay, cool. Do we get to sample in the tap room during training?
I mean, my rule is no drinking on the job, so my rule is no. But if a franchisee feels comfortable with that, that's up to them.
Good for you. What is the investment range of the franchise?
We'll be updating it this year, just with the cost of everything going up and us opening up a few more locations. It'll be right around 1 million all the way up to 1.9 million.
Mm-hmm.
And the 1.9 is a cold dark shell that you have to add everything, but the landlord's going to give you a ton of money in TIA.
Sure. And what about the footprint typically?
Low end, 3,800 square feet. And then high end is going to be 6,000 square feet. We actually added duck pin bowling to 2 of our locations, one here in North Carolina, one in Nashville, Tennessee. So if you want to be duck pin bowling, or if you have to have a kitchen inside, you'll be closer to that 5,000 to 6,000 square feet.
Wow, that's pretty big.
Yeah, they're big. Our smallest one is probably going to be Fort Worth. It's right around 4,600 square feet. And then our Charlotte location is 4,700 square feet.
How many people does that hold on the smaller side, you think?
What it legally holds?
Yeah. Yeah, legally.
199 inside.
Okay.
What it holds on an anniversary party or a grand opening or something like that, 500-600.
So Rich, is this your legacy business? Is this the one that we're going to hold on to for a bit and grow? What's your vision for this company?
Yeah, my vision is 4 or 5 years to get it to a point, 30, 40 locations open and another 30, 40 or 50, in development, and have PE come write me a check, whether that's taking all the chips off the table or the majority of the chips off the table. It's not my legacy, and I'm very open and transparent, and my team is very open and transparent with our franchisees and letting them know. So all questions are available to ask unless my lawyer tells me I can't answer them.
Fair enough. Well, knowing the environment we're in with PE, I'm sure your phone will be ringing off the hook after this podcast episode airs, I'm sure it's already been ringing, but yeah, PE certainly is not shy.
We'll take an offer right now.
Be careful.
I would definitely
be careful what you wish for. They would love to take a majority of interest, and you get to keep doing all the work.
I never turn down an offer. It might not be the right offer, but I still want to listen.
There you go. Nothing wrong with that. Tell me about when folks are looking to buy the franchise and they're evaluating other franchises, usually in the process too. What's a piece of advice that you give them when they're seriously considering? Because I'm sure you really, during this due diligence period, you want them to be careful.
Yeah, I actually just had a conversation with a candidate maybe 2 months ago, and they were looking at other opportunities. And I told them, we want what's best for you. I'd rather you take the time to do your due diligence, dive into the culture, the founders, the team, and make sure that it's a good fit for you. Because if you just choose us because we pushed you into it or we thought it was a good fit, and later on, it wasn't, and you didn't do the due diligence on the other companies, I just don't want that. So for me, we're very open and transparent. We want people to do their due diligence. Happy to answer any questions on, franchising in general for our candidates. And then they also have to be a good culture fit for us. Like, we don't award franchises to just anybody. And I think that's one of the biggest things. People think, well, I got the money, I want to do this. We said no to quite a few people in our early stage because they weren't a good culture fit.
That takes guts, man, to tell people no when you're a brand new founder. That is difficult.
When you see a $60,000 check in front of you, yeah, it's pretty tough.
Absolutely. But the relationship in franchising, it's basically a marriage, man. You're together. How long is the franchise agreement for?
5 years. We've had some that want to negotiate 10, but right now we just have it at 5. We'll probably extend it to 10 as we get bigger.
And then it's renewable every 5 years then?
Yep. Yeah.
Since this is not your first rodeo in business, Rich, would you maybe share any words of wisdom of maybe most memorable piece of advice that you received in business?
Yeah. One of the biggest pieces of advice I think I've ever sold is, if you can sell, you can do anything. And that's with every business, right? Sales is the heartbeat of the company. If we don't have people coming into our doors or finding ways to get people into our doors, then we're not going to be successful. But I always say to people who ask me for mentorship or they want to start their own companies or do something new is just take the action. Overall, action wins every single time, because what you think you don't know or what you think you can learn by watching a YouTube video or reading a book is going to be completely different when you go do it. And you can read that book 1,000 times and get an idea of what might happen or what might go wrong. But, my journey is completely different than yours. What you went through in your franchise time and what I'm going to go through in mine, we're going to hit different hiccups. Now, can I lean on you and say, hey, what would you do in this situation? Sure. Can you be a good cheerleader for me? Sure. But if I don't go take the action, I'm never going to learn. The last thing I always tell everybody is don't fear to fail. Failure is your trampoline to success. If you're not failing, you're not learning. If you're not learning, you're not growing. And if you're not growing, you're not living. And that's pretty simple things.
That's great advice. Well, this kind of segues. I always ask a question called the tip jar, is the last part of the podcast, where I ask if somebody can give some advice to somebody who's looking to get into franchising, and you've offered some great business advice. Is there something in franchising? Let's say I was going to franchise my company. What would be something specific about franchising that you would want to kind of give me a heads up on?
Yeah, I think for me, I wish I could go back before I started the franchise and actually speak with some franchisors. And you'd be surprised, all the franchisors that I've spoke to and everybody in the franchise world, even consultants and brokers, they're all very open to assist and help out. So I would go, if I could go back, I would actually have multiple conversations and kind of understand what I need to do before I start the franchise, because some of the stuff that we're still working on and finalizing could have been done, or at least mostly done, before we actually started, or while we were going through the FDD legalities and going through that process.
Yeah, that's great advice. I mean, I always say the franchise community is extremely generous, and you just got to get out there, go to the conferences, go to the events, or reach out to local franchisors that are in your area. And they often have they always have typically kind of mastermind groups and stuff. So there's always somebody you can reach out to. Yeah. Rich, if someone was interested in the franchise opportunity, where would they go?
Yeah, www.ownahoppin.com, or you can reach out to me directly via email, rich@hoppinbrands.com, LinkedIn, just search my name, Rich Moyer, LinkedIn, or Rich Moyer Hoppin. You'll see a ton of podcasts and a ton of things pop up.
Nice. Ownahoppin.com. I like it.
Simple.
Rich, thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate it. This was fantastic. I wish you all the best. I think you're going to light things up here, so I'll be watching you.
Awesome. I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you for tuning into the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. For additional insights, guest applications, and to stay connected, visit us at efbpodcast.com. The Emerging Franchise Brands podcast is for entertainment purposes only, and the views expressed do not necessarily represent those of Emerging Franchise Brands, its host Frank Fumey, or Emerging Franchise Group, LLC. Any discussed franchise or investment opportunity requires thorough investigation, obtaining proper disclosure documents, and expert consultation before making any investment decisions. The podcast and its host do not offer professional advice or endorsements, and they hold no responsibility for actions, representations, accuracy, or consequential damages related to the podcast content.